Disregarding those who hinder us from salvation by St. Nicodemus the Hygorite, an excerpt from Discourse 10 of his book Christian Morality. When you perform one of God's commandments, or observe the divine and sacred canons of the holy apostles, or of the ecumenical and local synods, or the traditions of the church, and quite simply when you strive to do the will of God and another person is scandalized on this account, then you should disregard that scandal and carry out the commandment of God and observe the divine and sacred canons, saying to those who are scandalized and would hinder you what the apostles said to the Jews: we ought to obey God rather than men. And again, whether it be right in the sight of God to hearken unto you more than God, judge ye. For if, on account of the potential scandal and out of fear and the desire to please men, you contemn the commandment and will of God and the divine canons, putting men before God and the love of men before the love of God, you become man pleasing and rather than God pleasing. You sin and you grieve God and the saints rather than grieving men, fearing men more than God. Who can fail to see how contrary all of this is to the divine scriptures and to your salvation? If a man should at all sin against another, then shall they pray for him to the Lord. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? And again, fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Hence, St. Basil the Great says that one should not impede him who does the will of God, whether he does so according to God's commandment or according to some other purpose in conformity with the commandment. Yet, neither should he who does God's will obey those who impede him, even if they are friends, but abide by that judgment and decision that he has made. One ought not to impede him who does the will of God, whether he is following the commandment of God's behest or in accordance with reason. Neither should he who does God's will put up with those who hinder him, even if they are friends, but should abide by his decision. The Divine Chrysostom says, we should show as much concern for people as not to give them scandal. But if we do not scandalize them, they reproach us heedlessly and indiscriminately, then we should disregard them and weep for them. You should have regard for what is honorable before the Lord and men. But if you do not give scandal and another person reproaches you, do not be concerned about this. Let us concern ourselves about men to the extent that we do not give or afford them a handle against us. But if, though we afford no handle, they wish to accuse us heedlessly and indiscriminately, let us laugh, not weep. Do thou take thought for things honorable in the sight of the Lord and of men. If, though, you take thought for what is honorable and the other man jeers at you, have no further concern about it. And again, he says, if a scandal ensues from us, then woe to us. But if it ensues from someone else, then we bear no reproach. Woe, says God, to those on account of whom my name is blasphemed. What then? If I do some God pleasing deed and another blasphemes, then I do not have the fault, but he who blasphemes, since it is to him that God is blasphemed. When some God pleasing deed is thwarted on account of the scandal caused to another, then we should disregard that scandal. But we should not disregard it when we are not compelled, on account of that scandal, to sin against God. For when the scandal is due to us, then woe to us, but when it is not due to us, not so. Woe to you through whom the name of God is blasphemed. How then if I do something right, but another blasphemes? There is nothing in me, but only to him, for it is through him that God was blasphemed. For when something pleasing to God is hindered by someone else being scandalized, it is right to disregard the scandal. But it is time to be concerned about it when we are not compelled, because of that person, to offend God. And again he says, therefore, let us not consider only whether certain people are scandalized, but whether they are justly scandalized, and if it is not to our detriment to compromise. If someone is scandalized because I wish to renounce the world, that is, to become a monk, it is no longer my concern. Look at the examples in the scriptures. John hinders the Lord from being baptized. Quote, but John forbade him, saying, I have need to be baptized of you, and you come to me? End quote. But the Lord scorned such an impediment, since it was contrary to the will of God. And Jesus answering said unto him, suffer it to be so now, for thus it becomes us to fulfill all righteousness. Peter tried to hinder the Lord from suffering and dying. Be it far from thee, O Lord, this shall not be unto thee. But the Lord rebuked him, calling him a stumbling block and Satan. But he turned and said unto Peter, Get behind me, Satan, for you are an offense unto me. For you savourest not the things that be of God, but those that are of men. Reflect that the Lord spoke to Peter the same words that he spoke to the devil on the mountain, as the sacred Luke says, Get thee behind me, Satan. He did this in order to teach us that whoever opposes the will of God is another devil and Satan. For Satan means adversary, and it is he that causes scandals and not the one who observes the will of God.